Welcome to TorquePoint VoterTorque podcasts for election 2023.
Welcome. I'm Simon Ewing-Jarvie.
And I'm Heather Roy.
There's a lot to talk about this election, Heather.
There is, and 25th of June today marks 100 days from when voting commences. People will be able to pre-vote like they did last election, and it really is time to start turning your mind to who you're going to vote for, what parties are offering which policies, and how those things are going to affect your life. We'll be looking at a number of things. We'll start with our next podcast being an overview of the political spectrum. So what do terms like left and right, that you hear a lot about in the media, really mean? And where do the parties contesting the 2023 election sit on that political spectrum? So we'll talk about things like conservatism versus liberalism, and whether parties have a socialist or a state-run tendency, or are their policies factored more in terms of the free market?
Yep, and we've got some longer clips on YouTube that you can go and see the slides as well on that. So we're going to also look at political polls, Heather.
Yep, there's going to be lots of political polls. There's already quite a few happening, but there will be more in the run-up to the election. What do they mean? What can you take from them?
Yep.
And then we're going to look at the parties themselves. We'll do a podcast on each party, including some of those smaller parties that are emerging as potential players in the election result. Parties like TOP, perhaps the New Conservatives, as well as the parties that you'll all know well and be familiar with.
Great. And the issues, the offerings, the promises, whether they come to policy or not, that's another question. But it's important to actually line those up and then compare them, especially on the big ticket items like health, education, defence and so on.
That's right. We won't be examining bread and butter. That's a slogan, not a policy.
Yep.
But you're right. Things like health, education, cost of living is being talked about a lot already in terms of policy initiatives and the economy. Taxation, lots of different parties offering different things in that space. And one of our old favourites?
Defence.
Yes, we'll have a podcast on defence.
We'll have more than one.
So, who's going to win the election, Simon, if you were a betting man?
Well, I'd like to know that the voter was going to be the winner on the day. But look, actually, I think the way this is shaping up is it's going to be the real fight is going to happen after the votes are in. And the possibility, I'm not suggesting that a hung parliament will result in another election, but I think there's a real potential for a null outcome where neither party can get enough friends to form a coalition, to form a majority government, if and I'm now calling them the mid-range parties, ACT, Green to Party Māori, all choose to go supplying confidence only and sit on cross benches, and forcing either National or Labour to come cap in hand for every single piece of legislation. Yeah, that's actually not an impossible outcome from this election.
There's been a lot of talk by parties about crossbenchers, and in fact my understanding is that when Jenny Shipley was Prime Minister and things were starting to unravel towards the end of that Parliament, she had to go cap in hand for every single piece of legislation to Alamein Kopu to get her support. It's not a good position for the bigger party in government to be part of if there is a minority government. For me, we're still almost just under 4 months away from an election. I think that nothing is certain yet. Things are looking pretty tight. And it may well be that because of policy initiatives and the odd scandal here and there, that as the election approaches, there's more clarity around who will be there. But I think this is going to be a real MMP election, and I say that because both the Green Party and the ACT Party are polling quite strongly compared to sometimes where they are. ACT particularly is surging ahead in popularity, and it will be interesting to see if it can maintain that leading into the election.
Yeah, and I think there's a strong possibility of an overhang. And that'll be caused by the Māori Party because they will likely win 2 or 3 Māori seats at least, but their party vote will be below that level. Yeah. So they'll probably come in around 2.5%, and so that will create a parliament of 121 potentially more.
Sometimes 122, that's
Yeah,
right.
makes it so much harder for either side to form a solid majority.
Yep. And one thing that I feel particularly strong about is the 5% threshold. I think it's too high. The Electoral Reform Panel has come back saying it should be dropped to 3.5%. I think if you're a true believer in democracy, then the right level is 0, so that every vote goes to the party to which it was cast. And we would see a number of extra players then with different possibilities about forming a government. So we'll probably do a podcast on that as well.
Definitely, yep. I think definitely. Yep.
So we also want to hear from you. It's not just about us talking. We do want you to send us your questions and tell us what you'd like to hear about in these podcasts.
Absolutely. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can go over to our website, torquepoint.co.nz, and that's not the flapping your gums kind of talk. That's TORQUE, leverage, POINT, torquepoint.co.nz. Go to the contacts page, send us an email with your question, and we'll try and include it in the next podcast.
Well, I think that's about it from us for our introductory podcast. Please join us for podcast number 2, which will be the political spectrum.
Yeah, we know you're short for time, so we're going to try and keep these episodes short. You can, if you've got a day spare, you can binge them or a long road trip, but otherwise we'll try and keep them under 10 minutes.
That's right. I'm Heather Roy.
And I'm Simon Ewing-Jarvie.
We'll talk to you soon.
Got it.